was like, Jim, you gonna run these with me? Jim, that was Jim. That was the end of Jim.
That was it.
Right?
No gassers, right?
No
That was
gassers.
it.
No gassers.
What's up, everybody? Trey Wingo here. Welcome into another episode of Half Forgotten History. Our guest this week has a lot of history and not much he wants to forget in any way, shape, or form. If you look up the term journeyman quarterback in the dictionary, you might find this guy's picture, Josh McCown. But his story is remarkable, and his persistence to find a way to stay in the NFL for so many years with so many different teams is absolutely a joy. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoyed this episode with Josh McCown. All right, so if you could describe the Josh McCown NFL experience in like one phrase, in your words, what would it be?
Oh man. Well, we tried to express it on the wall behind us, but journeyman. I mean, I think that's probably that's the one word phrase would be a journeyman. I think boxes and tape, is another way I would describe it. I think my wife would describe it that way. But yeah, just a lot of stops and not probably what you come into the league expecting or wanting. But you know what, Trey, I wouldn't change it. I think all these experiences were so special, and we laugh about like hanging, the jerseys, but there's so many guys. Like, I don't have a house big enough to put all the teammates that I love up there. Like, a lot of guys put their favorite up there, and so for us, it just reminds us of that stop and that stop and that stop, and all the great people that we got to meet along the way. So just the journey. I think journeyman probably would be the best phrase.
All right, so we'll get to the NFL journey in a minute, but I always like hearing the backstory. So how did your journey in football begin? When did you realize, hey, I like this and I might be good at it?
Yeah, I don't know if I ever thought I was good at it, but we had pads growing up, and we'd play in the yard, and growing up in Texas, you grow up watching the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Oilers, and we'd come home from church, we'd turn that game on, and about halftime of that game, we'd go out in the yard, me and my brothers and my dad, and we would throw the ball around, and we would start playing, and we would try to be the people that we saw on TV, and especially as a kid growing up, late 80s, early 90s, you're watching the Cowboys dominate with Troy and Emmett, who I eventually played with, and Michael and the guys. And so just fell in love with the game that way. Remember very early my favorite player being Joe Montana. And then, kind of as I got into high school and started really understanding football, Brett Favre was winning MVPs. My first jersey I had was Randall Cunningham. And just loved how he played for the Eagles. And so I just we were Texas people, and so I loved playing all the time at recess and all that stuff, and followed the Cowboys and Oilers. But I just remember loving the whole league, just loving watching football on Sunday afternoons, and so I think, yeah, very early, and just grew up in a competitive household that loved sports. We were always in a sporting event one way or the other, whether it was football or basketball, and but I think as our kind of talents shaped up, football began to take over more and more of our time and infatuation, and so yeah, it was very early, and just credit to probably my folks and my dad for getting us out there and running us around the yard, letting us run into each other a little bit, and learn what that feels like, and all that stuff.
So I think that's an important point, because I don't think, unless you grew up in Texas or Western Pennsylvania, there are certain or Ohio, where high school football is absolutely king. I don't think you can quantify how important football becomes in those certain areas of the country. Like, every other state a lot of states like to claim we're the best football state, Florida, California, Pennsylvania, Texas, even New Jersey to some degree. But the idea of the hold that football had on the state of Texas, people, if they're not from there, you really don't understand how powerful that is.
No, you don't. And I mean, I do think you're hitting on it, the high school football aspect of it. And I think for most people from Texas, it was integrated into kind of, the toughness, and you talk about Western PA and Ohio and those type of areas, where I think those things were, culturally or whatever, just highly valued, and then just the sense of community that comes with high school football, and a lot of these high schools in Texas, especially in small towns, just similar to where we live now, where the heartbeat of the community is based on the football program, and you can walk into a lot of small businesses in the community, and that person has a connection to whether they have a kid play on the team, whether that person themselves played football in that program, and it means something to them, and the legacies and the stories, and listening to my uncles talk about it, my dad talk about their high school football teams, and this team was better than that team, and oh yeah, we lost to that team in the third round of the playoffs. All those things you get indoctrinated with as a young kid, hearing those stories and wanting to be a part of that tradition that goes through these high schools. And some things are good, some things are not. But I think overall,
Yeah.
the sense of community that comes with it, when it's stewarded the right way, is very positive for a young person.
Yeah, I mean, like I grew up on the East Coast, but my parents are both from Texas, so we had tons of relatives in the state. And I felt like sort of I was a Texan by osmosis, and maybe that's why I love the game. I wanted to play, I was just terrible at it. So, when did you sort of make the transition from like liking football and playing with your family to going into the organized football thing? And how did that sort of develop your relationship that took you into college and the NFL?
Yeah. So we didn't, small town here, and it's different everywhere, but small rural community, we didn't have like a huge, robust like Pop Warner league. So
Right.
a lot of times you didn't get to start playing until sixth or seventh grade. We had hired we had gone through a coaching change in our program, by a guy by the name of Danny Long came in and became the head coach, and he was coming from a storied program over in Marshall, Texas, with Dennis Parker, who had ties to San Antonio and Converse Judson, and just this historic Texas football program, and he brought this program to our high school, and it was a holistic thing. It wasn't just saying, "Hey, boys, show up in August and let's try to win a few games." It was
Yeah.
January. You're starting with a real off season program where you're doing, kind of boot camp type things to build team, to build discipline, all these things, and it totally flipped our program upside down. And during that, just those processes and those iterations of team as we went through, I just remember falling in love with that, and just like, man, this is what it's about. It's about getting guys to come together and try to accomplish something greater than ourselves. And through those programs, they identified positions very early, started training quarterbacks very early. We had a quarterback coach by the name of Matt Turner, who still to this day is probably one of the greatest coaches I've ever been around in my life. And he's largely responsible for developing my older brother, Randy, who went on to Texas A&M, myself, and then my younger brother. And we were the beneficiaries of that. But just the detail that they came with, it was unbelievable. And it's really shaped kind of the course of our lives and careers. And so I would say it was, junior high to high school, and then as my skill set grew and my physical ability grew, it all matched. But those guys bringing in that program is, I think, what made me fall in love with the game and wanting to be a part of a team.
Side note, I mentioned my family from Texas. My mom's sister lived and grew and raised her family in Marshall, Texas. So I know exactly what you're talking about when you talk about the passion in Marshall, Texas. Now, you just said something very interesting. You said as your love for the game matured and your physical self matured. And those things were sort of on different paths for a while, right?
Oh, 1000%. I mean, my love for the game was up here. My physical self was still down here at about 5'4". And you go through different stages in life, and I'm sitting there, my older brother, he's a varsity quarterback as a 10th grader, and has this great high school career, and widely recruited by everybody in the country. And I remember, Lloyd Carr calling our house at midnight to recruit my older brother, and I mean, just all of these things. And then you're the little brother that's supposed to fill in the footsteps, and I'm kind of standing in the mirror, squinting and like hoping, like trying to make yourself grow, Trey. I mean,
Yeah.
just and so there was a coach, who's now the head coach of UTSA, by the name of Jeff Traylor. And Jeff was a young high school coach on that staff that I mentioned. And he really poured into me. And, when I was in my brother's shadow and just he really poured into me and just helped me believe in myself. And a lot of that had to do with basketball. He was our ninth grade basketball coach, but just really, really poured into me and kept me believing. I walked in as a junior in high school. I did not start. I was not the varsity quarterback as a 11th grader, and I didn't start. And I walked in probably week 3 and said, "I'm done. Like I'm gonna go play basketball. I'm not playing this game." I didn't want to deal with it. And I still wasn't physically. I mean, I had grown to about probably 5'11", 6 foot. And then the coach was like, "Have you called your dad yet?" That deal. And so Dad was like, "Get your butt back out there. You're playing football." Thank God, because it worked out. But that off season grew a few more inches, and the love for the game and the physical growth was starting to match up. And just had a great off season, and ended up having a good senior year, and was able to get a scholarship to SMU. But yeah, there was a big gap for a long time there, and my driver's license said so. When I was 16, it said 5'4". And so yeah, I had to get that changed quickly once I turned 21. It said it on there for a while in college, and guys would look at it and go, "I'm not letting you in here because you're 6'4" and this thing says 5'4". So yeah, I mean, it was definitely a gap for sure.
As also a late bloomer, believe me, I'm very familiar with the pain that comes with that when you see these kids everywhere, and you're looking up like this, and they're all talking like this, and you're like, "Hi guys, what's going on? Good to see you."
No doubt.
Those scars stay forever. Like, you're 6'4" now, and you had an unbelievable career. I'm 6'3", but I still, to this day, cringe when I still have my driver's license when I was 16. I swear to God, I look like I'm 7.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I mean, like, I coach high school football now, and I connect so much with those kids. You know what I mean? Like, you see the scrawny kid, and you're just like, buddy, just hang in there, man. Hang in there, man. Hang in there, because you're right. I mean, there are a lot of sleepless nights, and you're just laying in bed going, "Man, what the heck? What's the world coming to? Am I ever going to grow?" type of deal. So for sure, you carry that forever.
Yeah, and I went to college in Texas. I went to Baylor, so I'm very familiar with the whole SMU thing, the SMU scandal, the polo ponies, the death penalty, all that kind of stuff. Like, we lived it in real time. Okay, so what was it about SMU that appealed to you? Because this was post death penalty.
Yeah. So and you said it. I mean, I had 2 schools really, Trey, that Baylor and SMU were the only 2 schools that, like I said, I only started 1 year. The only 2 schools that came after me at all, really, that recruited me. It was kind of back and forth. Dave Roberts, I believe, was the head coach at Baylor at the time.
Absolutely.
Mike Cavan was at SMU, and I just think the fit, the Warren Beelan's a longtime linebacker coach, been in the NFL and throughout college. He recruited me, and I had a great relationship with him, and he really was probably the difference maker in me choosing SMU over Baylor. But that was 5 years, was that 97, 98, so it's 5-6 years after the death penalty, and they were trying to get the program back, trying, and I believe our class was one of the better classes, that they had since they had kind of come back. But it was so, when you walked the campus and even, when you interacted with the other football players, and just, it was that the death penalty was so devastating because of just the lack of talent on the roster, and just how hard it was to come back, and then what you were trying to unpack mentally for the guys that had already been there, and just dealt with the losses. So it was a tough time, and sometimes you look at it and you go, "Man, maybe that was prepare me for my future," because there was going to be stops along the way, whether it was Oakland or Cleveland or some of these places that I've been, where they're trying to get it right, and so yeah, I was there for SMU for 3 years, and then ended up transferring to Sam Houston State, but met my wife at SMU, and it was so all was not lost. It was a good move for me.
You mentioned your senior year, you transferred to Sam Houston State, and this was before the portal and all this kind of stuff where you can do this. What was it? Because you had success at SMU in terms of the way you played. What made you decide to want to transfer for your senior year?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, I started as a true freshman, and every game I started 6, 7, 8 games for 3 years. Okay, and I think we went through 3 or 4 offensive coordinators while I was in those 3 years. And so
Again, preparing you for the future.
no doubt, add them to the list. And so, I think when you go through those kind of coaching changes, there's obviously a player change. So I would get benched for a game or two because, well, let's see if it's the quarterback. Well, it's not the quarterback. Put him back in there. It's the coach,
Yeah.
And so there was and just so for 3 years, just having dealt with that, and I just said, you know what? I want to go have fun. I got 1 year left of football guaranteed to me. One of the scouts, I believe, it was Alonzo Highsmith, who I believe was in Green Bay, scouting in Green Bay at the time. He visited SMU, and he said, "Look, man, like you have the size, the frame to play in the NFL." I remember him telling me that, and my older brother had gone through, that process and didn't get an opportunity in the NFL. So I was like, "Yeah, he's heard that. We've heard that before, and it didn't work. I just want to go play football. I just want to go have fun." And one of my good friends from high school was down at Sam Houston State, and he said, "Look, man, we got a really good team coming back. We're kind of in between that quarterback, and so I ended up transferring down there, and it was wonderful. Had a great year. I think we won, the first playoff game in school history, or one of the first playoff games, or whatever. It was a lot of fun, and Sam Houston was everything I needed at that time, and was able to just enjoy playing football. And we had a really good team. We had, Keith Davis played safety for the Cowboys for a number of years, and then Keith Heinrich was also drafted tight end by Carolina Panthers, and Keith got 6 or 7 years in the league too. So we had a fun team, and so I'm really thankful for that decision. I wanted to stick it out. I didn't want to transfer. You're right; it was well before the portal, but it was the best thing for me in that moment, and I'm certainly glad I did.
Well, it certainly worked out for you. 3,500 yards, 32 touchdowns, 12 interceptions that 1 year. So as you're piling up the numbers, was there a point where someone, whether it's one of your coaches or a scout, sort of got in your ear and said, "Hey, you might be able to do this at the next level"?
Yeah, I mean, there were scouts coming through, and I remember I think we played a game early against Tarleton State, and there was a quarterback there that they had. I want to say his name was Steve Kelly, but I could be wrong. He had transferred from Miami, and there was a load of scouts at that game to see him. Yeah. And then I went out and played well, and we won the game. And then the next week, I just remember tons of scouts coming to practice, coming by, saying hello, and all of them kind of giving me that same vibe of just like, hey, this is going to be, you got a real chance here. But Trey, I don't know if you know this, but I love basketball. Like, I love basketball. Yeah. And so I played the whole summer with the men's team there at Sam Houston. And we would hoop every day, and we would go to little tournaments, around Texas, and we would play. And so in my mind, I was like, listen, I'm going to play this senior year. And, unless it's just a slam dunk that I'm going to the NFL, I'm going to play basketball for Sam Houston. Like, that's what I want to do. I talked to the coach about it. He's like, yeah, come out, whatever. And get to the end of the season, and playoffs, we go to Montana, we get beat. And so, I was bummed or whatever, but all in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to play basketball. I can't wait. And so I get ready to do this like a week or two after. And of course, agents are reaching out, and agents are like, you don't need to play basketball, dude. You're going to get drafted. Yeah. And I'm like, same thing with my brother. I'm like, yeah, my family's heard that before. Like, I'm going to maximize this opportunity to play ball. And so I was sitting with a scout in the film room in Sam Houston, and we're talking to it. And he pauses the tape and he looks at me and he goes, dude, you're going to be like a first day. Back then, rounds 1 through 3, you're going to be a first day pick, man. And I'm like, come on, dude. And he goes, no, I'm telling you, you're second, third round type of player. And he goes, this basketball stuff's so stupid. And and so that is really, it really hit me, I guess. And talking to some more people around the basketball program, they're like, hey, yeah, you don't need to play basketball, dude. Like, the scouts are telling us to not let you play basketball. So connected with my agent, same thing, was just like, you need to play, let's start working out. You're going to, be a high pick, get ready for the combine. And so the combine letter comes in, all those things start happening. You're like, okay, this is going to be real. Like, these people aren't lying. And so I, committed to working out for the combine and going after that. But but so that was kind of my process to figuring it out. Like, hey, I really got a shot at this thing. So.
Well, it turns out you did, and those scouts were right. So why don't we take our first break here? When we come back on Half Forgotten History, we'll talk about the next evolution and his transformation into the NFL. Stay with us. We're coming right back with Josh McCown. All right, time for our Mercedes-Benz trivia question. Now, Josh McCown has 98 career touchdown passes. We want to know which team did he throw the most for and which receiver caught the most of his 98 career touchdown passes. We'll give you the answers in the next break. You know, you open up a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter and you're opening more than doors. You're unlocking potential to do your own thing, be your own boss, and live out your own dreams. With 16 body types, your choice of a gas or diesel engine, and thousands of ways to customize, a Sprinter van is capable and versatile enough to help you drive your ambitions as far as you want to take them. So go ahead, unlock your potential inside a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter. All right, back with Josh McCown on this episode of Half Forgotten History. So it turns out they weren't lying to you. Everybody was right, and it was going to be a first-day pick for you. But obviously the draft in 2002, slightly different than the spectacle that it is now. So what was your draft day experience like, waiting to hear your name called?
Yeah. Oh man, it was. We had people at the house, and we were kind of realistic about it. I mean, people had said for anywhere from second to fourth round. All right, so we knew that we were kind of in between. And you're right, it was not the spectacle. At that time, it was the longest first day ever, and I think they break that record every year.
Yeah.
But I was the third rounder, 81st pick, so it had been a long day, and I just remember sitting there waiting and thinking, maybe not today. That's all right, and then the phone rings and it's Arizona, and it's Dave McGinnis. And, you just say, hey, man, Josh, this is Dave McGinnis, head coach of Arizona Cardinals, and we just want you to know you're going to be a Cardinal. We're going to pick you. And I just remember standing there. My older brother was right there with me. Like I said, he'd gone through the process and not heard his name called. So we were both just very emotional, and it was just a cool moment, and a lot of family, friends. My future wife was there. I mean, everybody was there, and so it was just an awesome opportunity to celebrate with them and everybody who had a hand in and me getting to that moment. So yeah, it was a special phone call.
And you go to Arizona, where I believe at the time Jake was still there, right? Jake Plummer was ensconced as a coordinator, right? Like, he was a former guest on Half Forgotten History, by the way.
Yeah.
He was a legend, played at Arizona State, got drafted by the Cardinals. So what were your expectations or realistic thoughts about what you could be, knowing that, Jake Plummer was sort of there as a starting quarterback?
Well, I think when you grow up in a small town, like, some of that stuff is so far off from you. Like, you feel like all the people on TV, especially back then, like outside of the day and age of social media, they're like aliens. Like you can't touch those people. They're, and then you get around them and you go, okay, they're regular people. All right. And so you start to feel that through the combine process. You start seeing other college quarterbacks. And I played in the Senior Bowl. You start seeing these other guys that you watch on TV, and you're like, oh man, I can throw the ball as good as him, or I can do this, So I think getting there with Jake and watching his skill set and watching how much he connected with the guys and just how he dealt with being the local hero out of ASU, I think it was great for me as a young player, and he was awesome. I mean, Jake was so there was good give and take, but never like, the over the top hazing or anything to kind of make me feel, uncomfortable. It was a lot of fun. Like, Jake's a lot of fun. So I couldn't go to a better place, in my opinion, just, to start my career, and then just to watch him, how he played, how he took himself through a game week and all that stuff was great. And I think for me, having some athleticism, the ability to run a little bit was good to watch how Jake managed that and learn to play from the pocket, but be able to scramble. And it's certainly not what it is today with some of these guys. But yeah, it was a great transition for me. I was really looking back, very, very thankful that it worked out with Arizona.
Was there a play in a game or in a scrimmage or in a preseason game where you did something and you're like, oh yeah, I can play on this level?
Oh man. Yeah, I think there was a. I'll never. I mean, I don't know if it was that moment, but I can remember this very clearly. Uh, Stepping into Jake was taking a day off or something like that in OTAs, and this was back when like OTAs were new. Like they didn't even
Real,
call them
yeah.
OTAs. Like they were just everybody's trying to figure out like what do we call this, type of thing. And and Jake was taking a day off, and I was in the first team huddle, and Jason McCadley, who we had drafted out of Alabama receiver, he was in. He
By
was
the way,
also
this was pre when all the good receivers went to Alabama, right? This
yeah,
was a different time. Yeah.
yeah. Jason was like maybe fifth round pick, I think. Um, uh, Speed, but not what. Yeah, he wasn't. This we're not dealing with Devontae Smith, but Jason was a very good player, and I get in a huddle I think I was just being myself, which is probably a little bit too much rah rah for somebody like Pete Kendall, but and I think they were like, "Hey, Rook, it's a freaking OTA, man, relax." But I was fired up, and we had a go route. We had like double go called. It was I remember it now. It was I right X6 989, and which is double go in the digit system. And Jason McCallie was on the right, and I threw him a go ball. And I remember like running down and celebrating with. You would have thought we won a Super Bowl, and because we're both rookies, so we thought it
Right.
was just like awesome. And like the context of it was, like really an OTA against the Arizona Cardinal defense, which wouldn't, would not be confused with 85 Bears by any stretch. And but we're celebrating. But after that, I just remember thinking like, I can play at this level. Like I
Yeah.
belong here. And so, yeah, I think that was for me one of the early moments on a field and at OTAs that I think gave me a lot of confidence to go, okay, you can do this.
So you were with Arizona for 4 years. Did you think you were going to always be an Arizona Cardinal?
Yes, I mean that's at least we talked about it like when you grow up watching Troy Aikman and you grow up watching these Joe Montana and these guys that are with their teams their whole career. I know Joe played with the Chiefs at the end, but like
Right. But
you grow up watching these guys and it was just that was my idea. Like once I started believing I could play, it was like, all right, I want to get this. If I become the starter here, I want to be the franchise quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals for the next 10 years, 12 years. I think that's every young quarterback's dream, and so yeah. I mean, and obviously it was that my story ended up different, but yeah, I mean that was the goal. Like it was never to leave necessarily. But you understand the business side of it, and as it starts to unfold, yeah, I ended up in Detroit. But yeah, I mean I went in that place for sure, wanting to be the guy, to help turn that thing around and get it rolling.
well, it's interesting because if that's your mindset, then how do you deal with the next 4 years? As you said, you move on from Arizona, and then it's the Lions in '06, the Raiders in '07, the Dolphins for a little bit in '08 until they signed Chad Pennington and then they released you. And then the Carolina Panthers, you were there for 2 years, 2008, 2009. How do you deal mentally with the guy who says, I want to be here forever, and suddenly you find it's just, okay, here, 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 and here?
Well, yeah, I mean that's a great question, and we're having, life is happening too. We're having babies along the way, and there's
Right.
a whole lot of life going on. And I think for us, just for the way our home operate, just from a faith standpoint, just trusting that there's a plan and working as hard as we can and just having peace at the end of the day, going, you know what, I gave it all I had there and for whatever reason I'm moving from here to there, and some of it's obviously on me. You got to play better. I mean, but I'm in Detroit, didn't really get a shot at that job, so I asked to be traded. Yeah, traded
Yeah.
to Oakland, and so some of those things were on us, but just I think that's how we dealt with it, was just believing that there's a bigger picture and a bigger plan in place. but it doesn't mean it's easy. And I think I was learning things at all those stops. I mean, got to play with some great guys in Detroit. John Kitna, learned so much from him from a quarterback standpoint. Dan Orlovsky was our third quarterback, who's worldwide superstar now on TV, and then Dan Campbell's freaking head coach, and Dan was our tight end. And so the people that we got to be around along the way, Lane Kiffin Lane was like 33, or like he felt like my brother was coaching me in Oakland,
right?
And now he's doing awesome. And then go to Miami and spend the offseason there. Favre comes out of retirement, kicks the domino down the road with the Jets and Pennington. Parcells calls me in and says, no hard feelings. We're signing Chad because we drafted him years ago. And so I get traded. Literally, Trey spent probably 10 to 14 days with Chad. All right, this is one of my favorites. So Chad gets there, and he's there for not even 48 hours, and we're playing Jacksonville on a Thursday night. And Chad's like a Rhodes Scholar, okay? And so
right.
Kurt Warner at the end of my Arizona time, like I'm getting good, John Kitton. I've been around Jake. We already talked about. I've been around some really good players, right, and some sharp quarterbacks. And so now Chad gets in there, and Chad gets the guys before the Jacksonville game, and he's going through the whole playbook, and he's going through the splits of the receivers. Hey, okay, on this concept, you're top of the numbers, right? And if the ball's in the hash, you're -2 from the top of the numbers, right? And you're going to be here, and you're going to be there. And he's just it's like a beautiful mind. And I learned so much from that in the sense of ownership, just extreme ownership. And I talked to Chad afterwards. Everybody, gets out of the room. And then, of course, we go out the next day against Jacksonville, and Chad goes, ding, 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 right down the field, touchdown. And I'm like, holy cow, man. And I remember talking to Chad and just thinking, like, what the heck? And, and in the process, like, I was helping Chad learn the playbook, trying to get him up.
Yeah. And
like, he would learn from me, and he would translate it to the guys how he wanted it. And I learned very quickly. He was just like, man, it's my butt out there. Like, at the end of the day, like, I know we have coaches, and I know and they install a system, but when you're the quarterback, it's your butt out there. And so this win-loss record is as much on us as it is on anybody, and we have to take ownership of it. And he said, in my physical skill set, I'm not going to run around and wow people with my athleticism. I need guys to be where they're supposed to be so that I can play on time. And I need that meeting to make sure that they're where they're supposed to be. And that just stuck with me. And I was out of the league after that and got back in or whatever, but that stuck with me of just like ownership. Like, take ownership of your, like, whatever you have to do to make sure the guys around you are prepared. Do that, because like Chad said, your butt's on the line. So that was a really a pivotal moment, and what probably helped me play so much longer after that.
I got to ask you about Dan Campbell, because I worked with Tim Hasselbeck for a little bit, and they were teammates for a while. And then, he got the interim job in Miami a few years ago, and, he was just all piss and vinegar and bravado and all this kind of stuff. We sort of, not made fun of him, but had fun with him. Man Campbell, what can he do for you? So, right. So what was your reaction when you found out that your former teammate, who was kind of out there as a player, was going to attempt to be a head coach in the NFL?
Loved it. So Dan and I go way back. Dan was in the same recruiting class at Texas A&M as my older brother.
Wow.
So I've known Dan since I was in junior high. Okay. And then fast forward, 10 years later, we're on the same team in Detroit. And then he gets into coaching, and you kind of follow him along and watch the interim thing in Miami. And it, like, everything, like, what you see is what you get. And I think a lot of times for a locker room that resonates. And he is, man Campbell. I mean, you said it, like, he is, his heart is on his sleeve, and he cares. He loves the game. He works tirelessly at it. He was a player at tight end where he was more of an inline blocking tight end.
Right.
You wouldn't be mistaken for.
He's not catching 40. He's not catching 40 a season.
No, and when you operate in that mindset, similar to what Chad said, like, when you are probably physically skill deficient than some other people, you learn how to prepare. You learn how to cut the corners in your brain and get really good at football. And so So I think a career spent like that for Dan Campbell, and then you couple that with a passion, I think it's what's allowed him to step into that role. And they're obviously climbing a big hill there in Detroit, but they're on a 2-gamer here, and wishing the best. But not like the hard knocks, how he's conducted. None of that is a surprise. Like, that is who he
Yeah.
is all the time, and I think that's genuine. I think guys love that.
Well, listen, I like listening to him talk. Whether it's going to work long term, I have no idea. But he could sell me life insurance. You know what I mean? Like Dan Campbell, like that's the thing that he brings across. And I love hearing those kind of stories, because Tim told me some of the same stories about him. So I just had to get you on that. So after all these times, then you're sort of out of the league for a year. You go play with the Hartford Colonials of the USFL. Then there's a lockout, right? And you can't sign anybody. At this point, you're thinking, it might be it for me.
Yeah, I really did. And I was kind of like, man, I guess I'll get a play in the UFL, give it a year, and then see what happens. And we're locked out. And my neighbor had come up to me and said, "Hey, you want to coach high school football?" And I was like, "Yeah, would you be interested in coming around the team?" And so I get around the team, the local team there. It's also where my oldest was going to go to high school, and the coach's like, "Hey, would you like to coach?" Yeah, I'd love to coach. So in my mind, I'm kind of like, I'm gonna in different, states are different,
Right.
and I was like, man, I don't know if I'm ready to teach and do all that whole thing, because that's how it's more how it is in Texas. And he's like, no, you don't have to, it's more volunteer basis here in North Carolina. So I was like, well, great, I'll do this. So I'm into that for like 2 weeks and enjoying that, like coaching and striping fields and just all in. And then Jeep Christ, who was the quarterback coach in Arizona, who drafted me, he was at San Fran with Harbaugh. And Jeeper calls me up and he says, hey, you want to come do a workout for us? What kind of shape you in? I was like, I'm in great shape. I've been running around high school field throwing balls and striping fields in the middle of summer. Like, I'm ready to roll. He said, well, come out, man, because this lockout's going to get lifted. And, we've drafted a young quarterback out of Nevada, which was Colin Kaepernick. We've drafted Cat, but we don't know if he's going to be ready because he's not been through OTAs because we've been locked out. And we may need a veteran. So I go out there and work out for those guys. Okay, this was the best. So I get out there, and Jim's out there in his khakis and his black shirt. Kind of how he coached.
Of course,
he's got cleats on,
his uniform.
And he's like, hey, you care if I do this workout with you? I'm like, yeah, man, let's do it. So like we're playing burnout as we're warming up because that's Jim, and we start getting into the routes, and Jeep's like, hey, let's throw a stick. Let's throw this. Let's throw that. And Jim's throwing every route with me. Boom, 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 boom. It was fun. It was awesome, and so we get done, and Trent Belke was the GM at the time, and they're like, all right, let's go over here on the side. You're going to run some gassers, see what kind of shape you're in.
Oh.
So I was like, oh, yeah, great. I was like, Jim, you gonna run these with me? Jim, that was Jim. That was the end of Jim's.
That was it.
Right?
No gassers, right? That was it.
No gassers. So I run the gassers, and they're like, hey, we want to sign you or whatever. So end up signing with them, playing a couple weeks in the preseason, and then not making the roster. We played San Diego the last game, and San Diego had a kid. I'm drawing a blank now. Wisconsin quarterback. Good little Scott Tolzien.
Scott Tolzien, yeah. Also went to the Packers for a while, number 13.
Yeah. So Scotty plays for San Diego, lights it up in the fourth preseason game. So they're like, if we can put him on the practice squad, we will. I think at that point I was out of, not like now, I was out of practice squad eligibility. So they're like, you know what? So they cut me. And that was my first conversation about coaching, kind of in the NFL and any kind. I just asked Jim because he had kind of, been a long-time quarterback or whatever, and just, hey, why'd you get into coaching? And it was a great conversation. When he cut me, I was like, hey, well, I got you here, And so,
one more thing.
Yeah. And so we talked about that. So then I go back, coach a high school season in North Carolina. Spend the whole high school season as the quarterback coach in North Carolina. And then we lose in the second round of the playoffs the same week that Jay Cutler hurts his thumb against San Diego, and the phone rings, and it's Chicago, And so and I go join their roster, and that was kind of how I got back in. But I'm very thankful for the time in San Francisco because it kept me fresh and it kept me kind of, ready to roll, and just gave me hope. Because as you said, I kind of spent it was kind of like, all right, it's been about a year, let's just hang them up. And so, so thankful for that time in San Fran.
That is so often the case, right? Just when it feels like there's nowhere else to go, something happens and it changes everything. And your time in Chicago, when you had the opportunity to play, reignited a career that would last almost another 10 years.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, finished that year on that roster and ended up starting the last two games, having fun, and played. It's just funny moments. You're sitting there, in Green Bay on Christmas Eve, eating dinner. You remember sitting there with Roy Williams and Roy kind of going, man, this is probably my last year. So these are my last games, and just processing life and like, man, you're winding down. I'm trying to get back in this thing. And Christmas night, I was out of the league 10 weeks ago. Christmas night, I'm coaching or I'm playing at Lambeau Field and finish that season. Go through the off season with the Bears. Same thing. Don't make their roster. So I get cut at the final cut down, and my wife meets me at the airport. It was a Thursday night preseason game. My fourth preseason game. My wife meets me at the airport with my coaching shirt, my high school coaching shirt. On a Friday, we drive straight to the stadium, changing the car, drive straight to the stadium, and coach that game. Like, it was awesome. Like, coach that game, coach the whole season. Same thing. 2 weeks in, the playoffs, I think we were a 2-round team, maybe 3. I can't remember. But Jay gets hurt again, and I go back to the Bears. Finished the last 7 weeks there with them, and then coaching change. Didn't play any snaps that year, but coaching change happens. They hire Mark Trestman, and they bring me back. And Jay and I kind of developed a rapport there in my time, and they bring me back, and then I make it through the offseason, make the roster, finally make a roster again. And that's 2013. And then, about halfway through, Jay goes down and, kind of played the best 5-game stretch of my life. And to your point, kind of what propelled me to be able to play this back half of my career. And that was really connecting with Mark Trestman and the way he coached and thought about football, everything that I had gone through, all the coordinators and the different philosophies. And, a lot of times coaches, they'll coach off the outcomes of plays. And so, if a play is good, whether they told you to do that or not, it's like, well, good throw, buddy. It's like, well, that's not what we talked about, but it's still a good throw. And the same thing is true with the bad throw. Well, it's a bad throw. I told you to do this. Tress was more like pre-snap. This is our process. This is what we're looking at. And I needed that because I had changed coordinators, and I changed coordinators basically every year of my career since I was a junior in high school.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I had been through so much. So there was a lot of stuff going around in old Duder's head. I was just, a lot of things. And so Tress really kind of quieted those voices, helped me kind of from a pre-snap standpoint, think about how, just taught me how to think about a play. And as it related to footwork and timing, and it led to me playing some really, really good football. And obviously that group there, you're talking about, Roberto Garza, we had drafted Kyle Long up front, Matt Slauson, we were stacked up front. Jermon Bushrod was a tackle. We were really good up front.
One of my favorite names in football, by the way, Jermon Bushrod. I just want to be 100% clear. He could only play offensive line with that name.
100%, and one of the best dudes ever too. Like one of the best dudes. But then Martellus Bennett was a tight end, and then Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, and then Matt Forte as a running back. So we were as good of a group from a skill set standpoint that you could have. And so it was just fun to be able to operate with that group. And I just had a really, really fun, and that could have been it. Like if I could have sailed off in the sunset and been like, this is what I've been chasing for the last 15 years, was just this ability that I feel like I have, that I can do this, play this game, and, wanting it to come, to kind of crystallize. And it finally did, thanks to Coach Trestman and that group. And so, finally felt like I played where I could stay somewhere, and they had just paid Jay. So it didn't work out to stay there, So that's what I mean. You kind of get in those situations where you're like, man, some of this stuff is just not meant to be. Maybe this is the path for me is to keep changing teams, and that's all right.
Well, you certainly did after that. After those years in Chicago, it's Tampa Bay, Cleveland, the Jets, the Eagles, and then ended up with the Texans. And the Cleveland image I'll always remember from you, whether it's right or wrong, fair or unfair. Both you and RG3 were on was it 2016 or 2015?
Yes.
I think it was 2016. 2016. On the team at the same time. And in back-to-back games, both of you go down with shoulder/elbow injuries, one on the left arm, one on the right arm. And like when you sort of asked for the picture of what the Cleveland Browns of the 2010s would be, it would be the sight of both of you on the sidelines with both of you with a different arm in the sling.
That's about right. I mean, it was just, it's not for a lack of trying, and it's not for a lack of passion in that city. I promise you. One of my favorite places to play. I would say those teams you rattled off, and really kind of starting with Chicago. I got a little bit of it with Raider Nation. And Detroit, we weren't good. But when you get into the Midwest and the Northeast with pro football, that's really experiencing pro football to me. And felt it when I was in Chicago, obviously. But then even in Cleveland, I mean, just the passion that those people have, that the fans have for that team. And so, it wasn't – we gave our shoulders and elbows to the cause for sure. Trying to win some games there, but a great place to play, and root for them when I see them on, that was a rough year, man.
Well, it's one thing, like there's a Ted Lasso sort of theme to your career, right? You have to keep believing, because it's one thing to be Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, and play forever and have all this success. It is another thing entirely, and by success, I mean team success. I want to be clear.
Correct.
It's another thing entirely to keep wanting to play, knowing the results as a unit are never what you want them to be. How did you sort of deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like we talk about it in my house and with my sons who are quarterbacks. Just always believe, always believe, always believe, and I think. Life's going to put you through things, and team sports put you through things where it always seems dire. And that's really when it becomes the belief or the faith or whatever you believe in becomes real, is when it's dire. It's everybody can do it when it's great. And you're right. I mean, and I have so much respect for Tom and for the guys that are able to do it week in and week out, and just the focus and the staying power mentally to be able to keep accomplishing that. But the test of the will to go, okay, this is what we're doing, and I went through it with so many situations, as you said, whether it was, in the startup situations that I was involved in, where it's a new head coach. There were several of those, and you learn so much of it, and you see the locker room, and the coach comes in selling belief, and then it doesn't go that way, and it's on the group to kind of pick that up and say, we got to keep believing, we got to keep fighting, So it's a tough thing. I mean, it's not easy, but again, I would say I've leaned on my faith as part of that journey to be able to keep believing in those things, because I just by nature want to believe in the good. I want to believe that the next thing is going to be a win. And I've said it over and over again, like all these jerseys, every situation that I walked into, like in my heart, like I really believed, I really believed I was taking the 2014 Tampa Bay Buccaneers to the Super Bowl. And we operated that way in the offseason and every situation, because I don't, why else would you do it if you didn't? If you're like, I went to Cleveland, then got cut by Cleveland and go to the Jets and walk in the Jets locker room. Like in my mind, I thought Jets about to shock the world. We're going to win a Super Bowl this year. Like Todd Bowles, like this group of guys, we're going to take it to a Super Bowl. So I never, like, it's just not in me to go, man, we can't do that, and I think that's, and hopefully one day, maybe I get to experience that, as a coach or something, but just that overall team success. But I think it starts there. You have to attack these things believing that way, because these years are hard and a lot of things have to go right to be successful in the NFL. But I never wanted to walk away from a season going, man, I didn't believe. Like I knew we weren't going to be good. Like that's not, I don't know. That just, why would I do it then? Why would you do it? You might as well go home and do something else. So,
right. But there is an acceptance at some point. And you said something to me once that I thought was really good. Some teams are going to be really good every year. Some teams are going to be really bad. If it's your job to suck, then that's the way you have to sort of deal with it, right?
100%. Like once you get past, like right now, where we are in the season right now, once you get to kind of this, like, hey man, we're 1-7. You gonna keep believing? I'm gonna keep believing. Like, I'm a realist too. Like, we're 1-7. Probably ain't making this thing. Now I'm gonna tell you, the good guys and the fun teams I've been on are all the teams that go, oh, like in your head you're doing the math. Like, all right, we run the table here. Like we can do it. We run the table here and get in. But you're right, Trey. Like you have to repackage it and reframe it and go, okay, this one wasn't our year. So, and my philosophy has always been like, if you're not playing for this year's playoffs, then you're playing for next year's playoffs. And you need to focus on the reps that you get right now. These are good reps to be able to better yourself for next year. But and so try to keep the group together that way and keep them fighting and keep them playing hard and all those things. And you feel that more going back to Chad Pennington's lesson he taught me, just of ownership. Like when you're the quarterback on those teams that got to go into a stadium when you're 1-10 and you got to play that game and you're getting evaluated, you go, okay, I got to get these guys to believe it's worth playing right now. And so that's a lot of work. It takes a lot of connecting in the locker room, a lot of conversations on the, at lunch, just, hey, need your juice this week, need your energy this week. And so yeah, but there's also a realization of like, there's only so many playoff teams. Once you're not in that group, how do you refocus? How do you reframe that? And it's no different than, a quarterback going, okay, or a player, have these conversations all the time with young players. Like, you're going to look around the landscape of the league, okay, much like I did, and you're going to go, okay, I'm not a franchise guy. All right, I'm on my third team. I'm on my fourth team. I'm not a franchise guy. So I can pack up and go home, or I can try to make a career for myself as something else, as a backup quarterback. It's the same thing for a team. We weren't good this year. Like we can repackage this thing and go, okay, what's the next best thing? And so, try to do it with those teams as best we could. Some of those situations are a lot harder than others. Like you mentioned, the Cleveland year. I mean, we beat San Diego, to get our first win. I don't know what week that was. And I just remember, like, it was like that locker room, like, you would have thought we won the Super Bowl, like, just so emotional. And it was special to us. And I'll never, ever forget that. Like, it was, and I think like you said, I think I had my arm in a sling. But it was a cool moment. And you take those away. And there's not you don't get a ring for that, although they probably should give us a ring for that. You don't get a ring for that, but it was just special, and so a lot of those down that stretch.
That's the beauty of the game, man. Like, you're in this together, and it's the only way it's going to work. All right, why don't we take our final break here with Josh McCown? When we come back, we'll talk about what's ahead for him and what he sees going forward. Stay with us. We're coming right back. Time now for the answer to our Mercedes-Benz trivia question. We wanted to know, which team did Josh McCown throw the most touchdowns for, and which receiver caught the most of those touchdown passes? Well, they're sort of the same thing. He threw the most touchdown passes for the team that drafted him, the Arizona Cardinals, with 25. And almost half of those touchdown passes were thrown to the all-time great Larry Fitzgerald with 12. And now back to more of our Half Forgotten History episode with Josh McCown. All right, back with Josh McCown on Half Forgotten History. So, in a dream scenario for you, having gone through the career that you did, could you envision yourself getting back into the NFL and being a full-time coach somewhere, or are you content with the things you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly open to that, for sure. I think I look at that kind of that back half of my career and some of the men, the coaches that I had in my life, and just, hey, you need to really think about this. And I always kind of thought, I don't think I'll ever coach, just because of the family dynamic. It does require a lot. But my kids are all, I was able to play long enough. My kids are, almost all out of the house. And so I do think there's a day that I'll pursue that. I just want to be around the game, doing some stuff now with Underdog Fantasy, doing a podcast called Scheme, where we break down players and plays and different things going on. And I'm having a blast doing that. And so yeah, I don't know exactly what the future holds, but But it'd be hard to say that I won't, find myself on a field somewhere, wanting to coach. It's just the guys, Trey. It's the guys, man,
Yeah.
and just being in that room and being a part of that, and the joy of an off season of going, okay, here's our team. This is how it's being put together. This is the mountain we're trying to climb, and journeying with that group is special, and there's nothing like it. And unless you're in it, it's hard to replicate it. And so I've been coaching high school football the last few years, been able to coach my sons, which is very special. And you certainly get that same feeling too when you do that. So I'm open to everything. I really am. I have the old saying, we plan and God laughs. I think that's probably the best phrase to sum up my career, because all these daggum jerseys on the wall, it's like there was never one place that we got to stay. And so I don't think we've ever kind of narrowed into saying, hey, we're going to do this and that's going to happen. So I'm open to everything. But I do hope and I do believe I will be around the game for sure.
Well, I have to ask this question because I'll be honest with you, I'm asking it with a preconceived notion. Is there a guy playing in the NFL right now who either sort of reminds you of how you played, or B, you see their career sort of unfolding the way your career unfolded? Because I have one in mind, but I want to hear if it's the same one.
Oh, wow.
And by the way, you guys are nothing alike physically. I want you guys, you're nothing alike physically in my mind.
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, I look at some of the veteran backups now, and I would say, just the approach. So it's hard to say. I mean, whether it's like a Teddy Bridgewater down in Miami or Case Keenum up in Buffalo, that are guys that you see them enjoying the game and putting their arm around the young player and doing everything they can to help them. I tell you what, Trey, I liked Taylor Heineke last night.
Boom! See, we're like this. That's exactly who I was thinking of. That's exactly who I was thinking of. Cut 4 times, and it's just doing whatever he can to hang on and make just enough plays.
Yeah, well, and playing good ball last night, and he's there with my buddy Carson Wentz, and they're in that room together, and I loved his heart after the game. They said, well, should you be the starter? Whatever's best for the team. Whatever the coach decides, whatever's the best for the team. If I'm supposed to be out there, I'll be out there. And I said that at times. What I hope people hear when you hear that's a guy that loves his team, and he really believes he wants the best for his team. And doesn't mean that Taylor Heineke's not a competitor. If you don't think Taylor Heineke doesn't want to be the starting quarterback, you're crazy. He absolutely wants to be the starting quarterback. But also running parallel to that feeling is he absolutely loves his team, and he wants that team to be successful, and he believes so much in the concept of team that he says, whatever the coach says is best, I'm all for. And I'm with that. And I just appreciated that so much from him last night, of just saying, if I got to back up Carson, I'll back him up and be the best I can be. If I got to start, I'll step out there and be the best I can be for my team. So I just appreciate that, and I loved watching that from him last night.
It's kind of what Tony Romo had to deal with in Dallas when he got injured in the preseason in 2016, and then Dak just took off, and he had that press conference, and he's like, look, I want to play, but Dak has earned the right to lead this team. It's sort of the same concept, right?
I agree. And I remember talking when we played them that year, and I remember talking with Tony afterwards and just giving him a hug and sharing that with him. Like, dude, I appreciate that so much. Like, just the maturity, and the selflessness to say that. And this guy, it's like for Taylor Heineke to say it, or for me to say it, it's like, dude, you've been cut 4 times. You've been like, that dude is the Cowboys at that time. Tony Romo was the Cowboys, So I think, incredible humility on his part to be able to share those thoughts, and had a ton of respect for him for that.
So is Ryan Fitzpatrick the second coming of Josh McCown, or is Josh McCown modeling his career after Ryan Fitzpatrick? I don't know.
Technically, I'm older. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
But I will
good.
But I will tell you this, a quick one. All right. Detroit had Mike Martz, and Mike had drafted. Mike was our OC, and he drafted Ryan at the Rams. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And I think we were getting ready to play the Rams, or either we were playing an opponent and Ryan. So the defense. So they had just played the Rams, so we were watching the Rams offense versus the defense that we're getting ready to play. And Ryan was playing, and I remember Mike pausing the tape and saying, "This guy right here, this guy's going to be a really, really good player, and he's going to play a long time." And he had so much belief in Fitzy, and so Fitzy's younger, but he had a lot more success. So I would say I would hate to say that he modeled his game after me, but I'll never forget old Mikey Martz calling a shot on Fitzy and saying how good he was going to be.
Well, listen, I think the universe might implode if at one time both you and Ryan Fitzpatrick were on the same roster. I'm not sure the world could handle that karma.
It really couldn't. It really couldn't. There's not, I think in order for that to happen, you'd have to carry 2 starting quarterbacks because we can't back up the same guy. So.
Well, listen, Josh, I really appreciate the time. I always respected your journey, and I respected the way that you comported yourself and carried yourself, because it's not easy. Like, all you guys are alpha males. Like, everybody wants to play, but the reality of how you have to deal with that versus the expectations of the situation, that's not the easiest thing to do, and you always handle that with grace.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trey. I appreciate it. Great questions, great stories that I hadn't thought about in a long time, so I really enjoyed this.
Well, be well, and don't be surprised if we call you again sometime soon, okay?
Love it.
So once again, thanks to Josh McCown. So many great stories. Really enjoyed catching up with him, his unbelievable career, all the highs and the lows, and all the stuff in between. By the way, special thanks to our sponsors this season, Mercedes-Benz Sprinter Vans. But coming up next week, the season finale in Half Forgotten History, it's a Manning, the one who's found a way to shine after football and by not playing football. Cooper Manning is our guest next week. We'll see you then.